There are, no shortage of inspirational mothers' stories in the Bible. And I have gone over them over the years. I've covered a lot of these mothers, but one that I realized this year that I haven't spoke on was Jochebed, who was Moses' mother. Moses is one of the most consequential figures in Israel's history. He ranks right alongside Abraham, who came before him, and King David, who came after him, in terms of his impact. Moses was the mediator of God's covenant with Israel on Mount Sinai. He was the receiver of God's law. He organized and led the nation through the wilderness for 40 years. He brought them to the land of Canaan. And he is most likely the author, or at least the compiler, of the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy. So before Moses' arrival, Israel was enslaved and oppressed by the nation of Egypt. But following his departure into history, Israel was an organized and disciplined and unstoppable force that conquered the land of Canaan and took possession of it. And so without Moses, there would be no Passover, there would be no priesthood, there would be no sacrificial system, there would be no 10 Commandments, etc. You get the idea here, right? Moses was a big deal in Israel's history. He is talked about and he's studied to this day. However, what is not nearly as often talked about is Moses' mom. Her name was Jochebed. It's recorded in Exodus chapter 6. It's not actually, her name actually doesn't appear here, but it appears a little bit later in the book. We don't talk about her, and we don't talk about the absolutely crucial role that she played in preserving his life as an infant. This is fascinating because Moses' story very nearly ended as soon as it began, because he was born into a perilous situation, which is summarized in the very end of Exodus 1. This is Exodus 1:22, where it says, Pharaoh commanded all of his people, saying, every son who is born you are to cast into the Nile, and every daughter you are to keep alive. So every son was to be killed. This account that we're looking through now takes place generations after Israel arrived in Egypt, in the time of Jacob and Joseph. Chapter 1 tells us that Israel grew and prospered in Egypt following the death of Joseph, to the point that Pharaoh, or I should say the leaders of Egypt, became threatened by them over time. And they responded by persecuting and enslaving the children of Israel. But despite how harshly Egypt treated Israel, they became even more numerous. Eventually it got to the point where Pharaoh resorted to racial genocide to address the situation. He started subtly by instructing the Hebrew midwives to kill all the male children as they were being born, but this plan failed because the midwives didn't obey Pharaoh. And by the way, we're not going to dig into this morning, but many of you already know that the midwives lied to Pharaoh and were blessed as a result. And so this is one of those interesting places where you see actually a lie being used in a positive way, and it's a very, very interesting conversation. But for now, we're just going to mention the fact that they didn't obey Pharaoh, and when they didn't, and that subtle plan failed, Pharaoh basically kicked it into high gear. He threw caution to the wind and began basically a systematic effort to kill all of the male Hebrew children, which is what we see in this verse here. So Moses was born at a time where their occupying nation, that is Egypt, was actually murdering all male children indiscriminately. And the only reason Moses even lived beyond infancy to become the great deliverer of Israel that he was is because of the courageous and faith-filled actions of his mother. And these actions are recorded in Exodus 2:1 through 10, and so that's what we're going to read now. Follow along with me as I read. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile, with her maidens walking alongside the Nile. And she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." So make no mistake here. Moses, as we've already talked about, embodied the future of his people. He was so instrumental in the future of their people. He would eventually lead them to places that were unthinkable at the time that they were in when he was born. But all of this would have come to a screeching halt right out of the gate had it not been for the faith and courage of his mother, which we see unfolding here. And the text shows us 4 characteristics of Moses' mother that enabled her to raise up Israel's future and turn him loose on the world. And by looking at them this morning, the hope is to learn how to follow in her footsteps and raise up humanity's future today. Of course, these lessons are presented from the perspective of a mother, but they have something to teach all of us. It isn't that men can't learn from these as well. It's just these come from the perspective of a mother because they were executed by her. So we're going to look at those now. First and foremost, the first thing is that she had the courage, Jochebed had the courage and the moral fiber to do the right thing no matter the cost. She had the courage and she had the moral fiber to do the right thing no matter the cost. At surface reading, it's easy to view this in terms of a mother's instinctual desire to preserve her infant child. But in reality, much more was in play here. Remember, as we just talked about, Moses was born into a period of systematic racial genocide. Egypt hated and felt threatened by Israel. They viewed the extermination of Israel's male children as a necessary thing to their own nation's survival. And so Jochebed was surrounded by pressure to conform or to suffer the consequences. And keep in mind that it was just not Jochebed and Moses in this account. There was his father, Amram, who is listed in Exodus 6, and his older brother, Aaron, which we also know from Exodus 7. Aaron was 3 at this time. He was already born. And there was his sister, Miriam, also not named here, named later, but she's actually participating in this account. She's the only other one that appears. But my point is this: the decision to hide Moses and not to comply with Pharaoh's command threatened all of them, the whole family. All right? She put the whole family at risk. They all kind of were complicit in this together, and they were all at risk in taking this action. And when we think of it this way, a helpful way of conceptualizing what's going on here is to think of somebody like Corrie ten Boom, to think of Nazi Germany and the systematic genocide that was going on there, and the bravery of Corrie ten Boom and her family in hiding the Jewish people in their home during that time. They had the courage and the moral fiber to do the right thing no matter the cost. And in doing so, they put their whole family in jeopardy, and they paid the consequences in a big way for doing that. But they had the courage and moral fiber to do the right thing anyway, to go against the grain. And in the same way, it would have been much easier for Jochebed to comply with Pharaoh's command. I know you're saying, no, it wouldn't be easy to kill your child, but again, think of it in terms of how it would impact the rest of the family. It would have been easier. There is a sense that it would have been easier for her to just comply and preserve the rest of her family in the process. But in that moment, she had the courage to say, no, this is wrong. And she refused to go along with it, come what may. And the author of Hebrews describes this decision in this way. In Hebrews 11:23, where it says, "By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict." They said, no, we're not going to go along with it, no matter what, come what may. And in this we see that part of raising up deliverers, part of raising up the heroes of the future, if you will, requires us personally having a moral compass that is unshakable in the face of this world's pressure. There is a lot of pressure to turn the blind eye to certain things or to just go along with things that we know we shouldn't. That it continues to be an issue to this day. Raising up the future, raising up people that really make things better, involves us having the courage to do the right thing no matter what the cost. That's how it started with Moses, was his mother saying, no, it stops here, it doesn't go any further than that. I'm not playing along with this, I'm not doing it. It's powerful to realize that. Started there. Didn't stop there though. Next we see that she had faith in God to do the impossible. The text shows us that she hid Moses for 3 months. She hid him for as long as she could. But eventually she reached a point where she could no longer protect him where he was anymore. And this is when she put him in a basket in the Nile River. And when you stop and think about it, she was kind of obeying, wasn't she? The male children were to be thrown in the Nile. Well, she put him in the Nile, she just put him in a basket, that floated. But at surface reading, it might look like she abandoned him to potential exposure and just prayed, Jesus, take the wheel, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm going to throw him in the river and hope for the best here. But that's not what's happening here. And most scholars agree that every step of this appears to be premeditated to give Moses a chance. It was a Hail Mary type of a plan, but it was a plan. He was placed in the reeds at the bank of the Nile. It was known that this was a place where Pharaoh's household went to bathe and people went to bathe. Miriam was watching from a distance the whole time to see what would happen. And she happened to be standing right there when Pharaoh's daughter had the baby in her hands and said, oh, would you like me to find a nurse for you? There was very much a plan in play here. Again, it was Hail Mary. There are so many ways that this could have ended badly, but they were out of options. They had nothing else they could possibly do, so they tried it. They did everything they could, and they put it in God's hands. But it isn't that they just said, Jesus, take the wheel and hands off. They were actively involved and ready to step through any open door that God might open for them, and they had a plan there. And they were looking for God to intervene, and intervene he did. Moses cried right at the right moment. And the Pharaoh's daughter was moved with compassion, and she knew it was a Hebrew child, but he ended up in the hands of someone who had compassion on this child anyway and was not caught up in the same way that Pharaoh was. And Miriam was standing on hand, and she took the offer that Miriam gave to find a nurse for the child. And in the end, Moses ended up back in his own mother's arms. But in this case, he was now under Pharaoh's protection, the protection of Pharaoh's household, and Jochebed was being paid wages to care for her own child. All right? It's powerful. It's beautiful. And we learn a couple things here. We learn, first, that we can't do it ourselves. We're going to come up against the impossible. And when we do come up against impossible situations and barriers that we can't overcome, it is reasonable to put things in God's hands. And when we do, what we realize is that God can take care of them far better than we can. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Didn't know what to do, had a barrier, went up against it anyway, put it in God's hands, and she ended up not only with her child, but under Pharaoh's protection and being paid to take care of it. There are so many ways that I would imagine that you can think of where something like this happened in your life. As Danny is getting closer to graduation, I am reminded, I'm sure along with Holly, that when he started his journey at St. Joe's 4 years ago, we recognized that that was a really good option for him because of the way that he learned and the type of environment that he thrived in. We recognized that this would be the best option for him, and we wanted to get him there, but we really didn't know for sure how we were going to get that all paid for. It's in Kenmore. It's way out of the way. We weren't even sure how we were going to get him to and from school every day. But we had calculated this thing. We had prayed it through. We had rested on this as a plan, something that we should do for him. And we went with it. And shortly after we committed to that, Holly ended up getting a phone call from St. Benedict's School. She did not apply for this job. They called her, and well, actually, you got a call from somebody. She did apply. Okay, well, so editing, she got a call being told that there was a job offer there, and she did apply. But she wasn't looking for the job to begin with. And she ended up getting hired the next day, just in time to start the school year. It was just before Danny was going to start school. She got hired, she got a job right down the street from school. And so she was able to get this, able to bring income in to help pay for this. She got a job right down the road from the school. She took him with her to school every day, brought him home with her after the end of the day. It was absolutely perfect in every way. She's been back to work ever since, and with this job that's good for her. That would never have happened had we not made that commitment, even though we didn't know how all was going to shake out in the beginning. And I'm sure that there are lots of examples you can think of where you weren't sure how it was all going to shake out, but you knew what you were supposed to do and you went for it, and God worked out the details along the way. And in the end, he worked them out better than you could have ever thunk up. Thunk is not a word, thought up. He worked them out better. That's exactly what happened here. That's what happened with us, with Danny. Now as he's graduating, we look back and go, man, this is really amazing the way this worked out. And that's what he did with them. Next, though, we also see that Jochebed was willing to make the most of every opportunity that God gave her. And so she has the baby back in her possession now. She has Moses with her for a limited time. And we see every evidence here. You have to kind of read in between the lines, but we see every evidence that she used this time as she was nursing him to embed the faith of her fathers into young Moses' heart. We know that she did this because though he was raised ultimately in the privilege of Egypt, he seemed to have remained keenly aware of who he was, and he remained sympathetic to the Jewish people. You can see that if you were to read verses 11 through 14, you can see that he got into trouble because he tried to align with them, and he tried to help them, and they kind of rejected him, and he got into some trouble by murdering somebody. But there were some missteps in the beginning, but what we realize is that he remained, even though he was raised in the privilege of Egypt, he remained keenly aware of who he was and sympathetic to the Jewish people, even at that point. And that's why the author of Hebrews puts it this way. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. So somehow, and we don't know how, but somehow, his mother saturated Moses' heart with the gospel as she cared for him in such a way that when he grew, even though he grew in all the privilege that the world had to offer at that time, he chose to be with his people. And he chose that over the comforts of this world. And what we can see here is that we should never underestimate the influence that we have on our children and on our grandchildren. Again, we don't always talk about just how much is being done when we dismiss the children downstairs and there's someone teaching them. We don't know how much spiritual formation is being done when mom is taking care of them, and dad as well. There's just so much impact there. And I kind of wanted to just ask for a minute. I don't want to take too long here, but I just wanted to ask just for a minute here. How many of you have things in your heart, in your soul, that were put there by your moms, right? That were formed there at the earliest age when she was caring for you. What are some things that your mom taught you when you were little that you still live by to this day? My mom was very much, it was very important to her that we understood, my sister and I, that we were loved equally, to the point that she would never do anything or say anything that would indicate preference one over the other. And it's funny how the little things are what stick in your mind. But I remember one time my sister and I getting into an argument about who had better handwriting. All right, and we printed and we wrote in cursive, and then we gave it to my mom, and we said, "Hey, can you tell us who actually has a better handwriting?" And we came back, and my mom had written her verdict on there, and that was that I had better writing in capitals, and my sister had better writings in lowercase. It was equal. And I was like, "Come on, take a side." But I know in that moment she was wanting to keep things equal, and that did impact me. There's lots of little.
Seeing your handwriting, your sister has the better.
And what's funny is I write on cakes now at Wegmans too. It's unbelievable. And they're not always that bad. So I hope what you're able to see here in this is the impact. I know that we're getting into the weeds a little bit here, but the idea is there is an incredible amount of impact that a mom has on a child when they're little, and they soak it up like a sponge, and it sticks with them. And what we see here with Moses is that she was able to impact him in such a way, even at that young age, that he never forgot who he was, and in the end, he was able to choose his own people over this world when he was raised in the household of Pharaoh. That takes a person of incredible character and an incredible faith, but also someone who's willing to make the most of the opportunity to spend with her children, to not be lazy, not to waste it. She recognized that child was a gift from God. She made the most of the time. And are you making the most of the time that you have with your children, with your grandchildren, with those children that are in your care? That's the idea here. Lastly, we see that Jochebed was willing to release her son to God's care and protection. She had him for a season. She didn't have him forever. She had him for a season, and she had to give him back, kind of like the way Hannah did with Samuel. She had to give him over. She did everything she could with him. She gave it her best, and we've seen here she really gave it everything that she had. But in the end, she had to hand him over to God, and it was in God's hands to do the rest. And I would argue that to this day, there is still, whether sooner or later, that need for parents to release their children into God's hands. My wife and I are going to be going through that again. We have older children, but we have Danny. He's going to move away, and we're going to be releasing him into God's hands. We've done what we could with him, and now he's going to be flying on his own, and he's going to be making his own decisions in a lot of ways that he wasn't before. And there's sometimes some difficulty in letting that happen. Every sermon's got to have the Wegmans example, right? So this is the Wegmans example. You would not believe how many 18, 19-year-old kids, especially male, for some reason, I don't know why, their moms call and say, my son can't come to work tomorrow, And I take the call, I'm like, is your son underage? Well, no, he's 18 or 19. Your son needs to call himself and speak for himself. Mommy can't call and take the call in for him, that kind of thing. And what you got there is a mommy who isn't quite gotten used to letting go, and the son as well, not quite used to it either. The letting go has to happen. If you don't do that, the spiritual side of it won't take effect. You're going to stifle his spiritual or her spiritual development. And I'm not going to open up for sharing in this particular case because I don't think it would be helpful. But have you ever seen that mom who never let go of her little boy and continued to interfere when he grew up, when he got married, when, those kind of, have you seen that kind of stuff happen where they don't let go? On my side of the family, there was it goes back a couple generations, but there was one mother in particular that meddled in every one of her son's marriages and split them all up, Never let go of her baby boy, you know what I mean? There's the investing, and then there's the letting go. Both have to happen. And part of the reason that Moses was able to become who he was is because his mother risked everything and poured everything into him, and then let him go and let God do his thing. Are we doing that today? We are, in our own way, bringing up the future of humanity. There are deliverers being raised right now. There are people that are going to impact humanity's future right now. And a big reason that they're going to be who they are is because of the way that they're invested in by their parents, and in particular their moms. I know that it isn't PC to talk about the mother's role nowadays in the same way, anymore. It's like all equal now. And I'm not trying to say that, it isn't good for a mom to go out and work in the workforce. I'm not trying to say any of those things. I think it's all wonderful. All I'm saying is don't forget, in this current age that we live in, the power of mom and the influence that she has. And if you are a mom, don't underestimate the power that you have to shape the world in the way that you invest in your children when they are little. Yes, Dad, you can do it too. I'm not saying that you can't. There's just such power there, and sometimes we overlook it when we start talking about getting out in the world and getting involved in careers and stuff like that. There is so much impact in the home that is just underestimated sometimes. And Moses became who he was in large part because of his mother's faithfulness. Happy Mother's Day. Make sure and thank your mom today. Buy her some flowers if you haven't already. Call her at least. I'm going to go see my mom today. She made an impact in your life, all right? And thank her for it.